Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. We're going to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris, and last time we talked a little bit about our egos and how they really are partners, and there's some spiritual beliefs about, in some circles, about destroying the ego, and Kris talked a lot about some of the pitfalls and how these are really tied to our beliefs, and I think maybe on this episode we start to build on that.
Well, we trust that you are comfortable.
Yep, still comfortable?
Indeed, and we thank you for your consideration once again.
Thanks as well.
And the subject matter of the ego, of course, has been discussed in spiritual and religious circles for thousands of years. And it is always interesting to note that almost all conclusions are based upon belief structures, belief patterns. Some of them do not necessarily bear truth. Though if you maintain a particular kind of belief, you may begin to see it and experience it in your life, which can at times confirm the ideas that you're holding as a kind of reflective truth. So it appears that, yes, we have heard all sorts of discussions about the ego being an impediment to spiritual growth, and yet we do want to assure you that is not necessarily the case. Simply because you identify with your particular ego does not make you the ego, nor the ego you. You are quite different and separate. Just as you are quite different and separate from your body. You are not your body, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, nor your ideas about yourself, which is sometimes very difficult to comprehend because you are accustomed as a species to think that obviously you are what you see in the mirror, you are flesh and blood, you are what you think about yourself, are you not? You are your ideas about yourself, are you not? And we want to convey very nicely that you are none of those. You are something different. But because you have identified with all of these things to such a great degree, it is difficult to separate you from all of those things. In fact, when you come down to it, you might not necessarily truly know exactly who and what you are. Just imagine for a moment that you get in your car every morning to go to work. When you get into the car, does that make you the car?
No, that's the vehicle.
Indeed, and you are the driver. So the self is the driver. The self is you. The self that you think you know and the self that you are might indeed be two very different things. The self that you see in the mirror and that interacts with other selves is not necessarily your true self. You are something quite different. You are that which existed before, you are that which exists now, and you are that which will continue to exist. Above and beyond the physical form. The physical form is an amalgamation of all your thoughts and ideas about yourself that you have acquired from familial upbringing, from background, from peers, from so-called authorities, from books, from religions, from this and that. Just imagine if for one moment you actually believe that you were, as some religions teach, you were full of sin, you're stained, you are tainted, you are full of iniquities. What would that make you? And yet, in spite of such ideas, you persist. You still exist because you know that you are quite different from any such projections onto yourself. So the very idea that you might be something very different is worth looking into. It is worth investigation. And this is what a spiritual path is meant to be. This is the true meaning of the human experience, to be able to separate ideas about yourself from yourself. Removing, as we have spoken before, removing those layers, those masks that most people use to bury themselves within. Much like Russian dolls, a doll within a doll within a doll, a self within a self within a self within a self. The first self is not you. The second self is not you. The third self is not you. Where is myself? But it is at the very core of all these other masks. And that is why there is a spiritual adventure, a spiritual path, a path of self-discovery. The idea that you could be anything other than love, creativity, and collaboration sometimes boggles the mind, that you would, as a species, accept the idea that you are less than you have ever told you could be. The very notion of accepting limitations, that you cannot be this, you cannot be that, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, as far as potential goes, is worth pushing back on. It is worth pushing those barriers back. It is worth taking down those fences and literally discovering that you are eternal, timeless, full of love. This is worth every ounce of energy that you can apply to that process. And people talk about wanting to be free. Wanting to be free does not mean that you want to be free so that you can have ice cream at 1 o'clock in the morning. or that you can stay up all night and never feel tired. Freedom means to have access to all of what you can be and all the potential that you want to explore. Now that is very broad, very expansive, but everyone has core ideas, core values that are often never necessarily explored. Yet, if you do take the time to explore those core values, you can discover things about yourself that have very, very highly rewarding, let us just say, effects, which includes the freedom to actually be yourself without having to resort to be what someone else wants you to be. And yet that is often the default in human society, to be as someone else wants me to be so that I can feel accepted. And that is not being unique. That is conforming to the status quo. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, Kris, I'm following you.
So the idea that you can tap into inner resources, which includes an ego structure that can assist you to peel back some of those masks, some of those layers, some of those false identities that you have utilized as a means of being safe, as a means of feeling protected, can be very rewarding. And that is the main reason why someone would create all these layers, because they want to feel and be safe. So they think that erecting a fortress, a psychological fortress, might make them feel safe. The unfortunate consequence is that when you build a fortress, you can't get out. So you are trapped in many ways. So beginning to take this fortress apart brick by brick, or wall by wall, is the true meaning of freedom. Many people might want to feel loved, but are afraid of being hurt, or perhaps that they are unlovable, is not uncommon. And yet inside all of those ideas and beliefs about oneself lies a very loving and lovable individual that may never have had the opportunity to express themselves, to reach out and be whom and what they want to be. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, this is all making sense, and it seems like there's some confusion with a lot of folks between, what is the identity, confusing that with the ego, and then rather than realizing the ego is really a tool to create a particular experience or particular reality, or maybe tool's not even the best word. But that's part of the tool set to create that, rather than what is really creating the experience.
Indeed, you could refer to it as a tool, because it can function in that capacity, just like you would use a hammer to hammer nails in the wall and create an infrastructure for your house, or whatever woodworking or other projects that you have going on. But if you use the hammer to, say, crack an egg, to make an omelette or to eat with, you're not utilizing it properly. You might end up going to the dentist.
Yeah, or really making a big mess, at least.
Indeed. So the ego can be considered a tool which can assist you to see. In fact, that is its purpose. The mind and the ego together work for you to be able to observe how your ideas end up as the events, conditions, and circumstances of your life. So utilizing it in that capacity can allow you to have actually very clear perception of what you are creating in here, your state of mind. That is where you live, in your mind. So your state of mind is your home. It is your reality. Everything else is a projection for you to take into consideration that there might be things you have set up that are not necessarily to your best advantage. And if that is the case, then you can start editing, revisiting what you have thought and created in your mind, in your state of mind, and create something different, something much more fulfilling for you.
I like that.
The point of human existence, of human experience, is not necessarily to work 9 to 5, pay bills, and then be buried. You are not a cattle, nor an economic experimentation. You are living, multidimensional beings, and you have so much more available to you, but you are not necessarily taught how to use these things, how to use your mind, your feelings, your imagination, your emotions, in a manner that can help you actually get fulfillment out of life. Not necessarily fulfillment as you have been told is what you get, but actual, literally soul soothing, nurturing, healing fulfillment that produces a very interesting outcome. And that outcome is peace of mind. And from peace of mind, the natural, effervescent health and joy are the natural results. When your mind is not at peace, you do not have many of those things. You are often experiencing inner turmoil when you are not at peace. Imagine what it would be like to suddenly have an end to all your inner conflicts, traumas, and turmoils, so that instead of an internal storm, you have sunshine, rainbows, warmth, and a very nice experience of life. The moment you can rest your mind away from all of your ideas of turmoil, pain, trauma, that is when your natural self begins to make its appearance. That is when you begin to feel like your true self. Not a self that gets up in the morning and has an inner battle with what they have to do today and who they have to be today. So just the contemplation of how is this possible can have a very deep and lasting effect. In fact, it could spur you on to actually want to discover, who is this damned beautiful inner self that I am, free of pain and turmoil and trauma? Would that not be a very nice experience?
Yeah, it would, and I think I've had experiences like that. I can speak to that piece, and it's going from earlier in life not maybe feeling that way into now frequently feeling that way. It's wonderful, and another interesting thing that was coming up is we don't have to like run off to the Himalayas and to do that. We can do it right from where we're at.
Indeed. The idea that someone on the other side of the world may have the answer for your happiness will lead you to disappointment. The idea that there is an answer within you, and it is not buried 1,000 kilometers below the surface of your subconscious, is far more entertaining and delightful. That you have those potentials at your psychological fingertips. That is far more empowering than giving your power away to someone else. And again, that journey begins with questions. Questioning the nature of your reality. Not your existence, your reality. Why are things the way they are? Why do I behave the way I behave? And why do I think the way I think? These are questions that can open the doors to a wider awareness, a reevaluation of everything you thought you knew might be necessary. Because through such a process, sometimes as difficult as it may seem, through such a process, you can see the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel. And the tunnel was not imposed upon you. The tunnel was simply built because you accepted ideas about you, who you should be, who you should love, what you should do, what you should think. And out of that you built a tunnel. So it is a kind of psychological and spiritual tunnel vision, where there is that little light at the end of the tunnel, and you can go there. And along the way you will dispense with limiting ideas, limiting beliefs, limiting notions that you have accepted, perhaps your whole life long. And as you do that, the burden of your own existence becomes lighter. In fact, there is no more burden to your existence, but there is a welcoming of joy, of peace of mind, of happiness. And you can recognize your effervescence, beautiful vitality that is you. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I follow you. It feels to me almost like a reinventing or rebirthing process when we change those ideas about ourselves.
In a way, yes, we understand the term rebirthing. And it is not very far-fetched. It is indeed very similar to recreating yourself, but this time, not according to the whims of family, society, peers, and everyone else, but this time, the way that is authentic to you. During youth, individuals may have many ideas about what they want to be when they grow up. Maybe a veterinarian, maybe a dentist, maybe a doctor, maybe a lawyer, maybe a welder, maybe this, maybe that. How many such young people are actually encouraged to do that very thing, even if they do not end up being, say, a carpenter or a welder or a dentist, but at least encouraged to pursue some of their ideas. It would make a significant difference in the quality of their lives. They would not necessarily doubt themselves simply because, as well, I don't think that you have what it takes to be this and that and the other thing. You might be better off doing what we want you to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, at least in my experience, it's a very common phenomenon to kind of take, just kind of looking for the words. Yeah, to kind of, when those dreams are shared, especially in children, to suppress that.
Indeed. This is where the process of self-doubt slowly creeps in, that you would have to doubt your own ideas about yourself, your own thrusts for life, your own desires. In fact, your own self. It is perhaps best to stop all of that and do what these other people want you to do, to be what these other people want you to be. And very often, as someone gets closer to middle age, as we have discussed before, they may suddenly realize that something is off. And they may start remembering some of those old ideas, perhaps to the point where they want to actually pursue. And there have been many individuals, and just as an example, a young man who is now a very well-known pianist was discouraged from pursuing his musical ambitions, and instead to get a real job in the real world and to enter the trade and stock market exchange. After a few years, he realized that he was slowly withering away. His sense of self was eroding because that's not what he was. He went back to his roots. And this, playing the piano, making music, is what he is about. But it took a while to realize that, yes, he did something to please others. It helped him in a certain way. But now it was time to return to what he felt in his heart was truly what he was. And he is very good at what he does. Joseph has mentioned him to you before. His name is Lionel Yu. So if anyone listens to this, they can look up on YouTube and they will see his history because he talks about it. Now, do you have something else that you might like to add or an observation of some kind?
No, it's interesting too, because as people look back, say, maybe there's different degrees of that suppression. When they start to outgrow it, even in the case with Lionel that you just discussed, and I know I've had experiences, and other people I talk to almost feel like it's a form of abuse is sometimes the word, of being like suppressed in that way in terms of those ambitions.
Indeed. It might be well-intentioned. Initially, perhaps the parents, the adults, aunts, uncles, grandparents feel that they would know what is best for that individual, even though that individual as a child may have such a strong desire, but is convinced to drop those desires. And there are many, many families who undergo such situations with their own children. However, the process itself eventually can become heart-wrenching, because the individual may have a more difficult time to actually pinpoint where their lives changed, and they have to then make some kind of course correction. It is certain that along the way they would have gathered invaluable information and knowledge that they can also now apply in their new direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it seems like with the shift and the shift in beliefs that's happening, one of the things that's shifting is this idea of authoritarianism, or of somebody, a parent, a government official, a religious figure, they know what's best for you and you just listen, to moving to belief systems and creating environments where it's like, hey, I want to be a musician. Oh, well, how do we help you do that? How do we enable that? How do we empower you? Which seems like the exact opposite. It seems like that's the direction we're trying to move in.
The idea that an individual's nature would be suppressed is a form of authoritarianism, however well-intentioned it may be. But the other proposal that you just made, that the village, the culture, the society, the family say, oh, you desire to be a musician or an artist or a sculptor. Let us help you develop the necessary skills and support you to that end. If the whole world spun around to this kind of experience, everything would change. Everything would change. So perhaps this is a potential future for your human race. We strongly support it.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering,
Even your great scientist Einstein was considered quite a dummy in school, and yet he persisted. And this is but one poor example out of thousands.
yeah, I know there's a comic book author, and he writes a little bit about his story that he was diagnosed with ADHD, and but all he wanted to do all day long was make these comics, and he just kept going and going and going, and now they're these absolute smash hit books. They're brilliant. And so he knew, and just never, it sounds like there was a lot of people trying to say this was a silly dream and this, and he just kept going. And they're absolutely phenomenal.
Indeed. Even your sciences have, to one degree or another, experienced a great deal of suppression, especially in the dark and Middle Ages, where the church knew what was best for you, which was to submit to its will. Even today, your sciences are confirming what some of the ancient Greeks knew. An ancient Greek philosopher, Democritus, spoke about the nature of atoms 2,000 years ago. Luckily, many of these things and this kind of knowledge was preserved. And your sciences today are confirming what your ancestors from 2,000 years ago knew. But it was, how shall we say, a very tumultuous journey. If you can imagine a probability, an alternate universe where the church had complete grip on the entire human race, you would still be considering bloodletting as a very advanced science. Galileo would not have been allowed at all. It would be a very, very different species for certain. So the idea that an individual can reinvent themselves, literally bring back those dreams of pursuing a different career or a different path, is not only within the realm of possibilities, but it already exists in many examples throughout your world. There are individuals who return to school to get degrees at 60, 70, and 80 years of age. There are individuals whose careers took off in the late 60s and 70s because they changed their entire approach to selfhood. They decided to retrieve their dreams and to become that person. So your race has the same potential as any kind of individual who does that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now then, might we suggest returning, Joseph, to everything that you have potential to be? And we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks, Kris. Awesome episode. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.